I found out my best friend was sending my ex screenshots of our conversations for a year. I opened my phone that Sunday morning, half expecting the usual spam emails, leftover group texts from Saturday night, and a few social media notifications. Instead, I saw a string of screenshots from an unknown number. My stomach flipped the second I recognized my own text bubbles in those images. Every single message I'd sent to my best friend, stuff I'd shared in total confidence, was right there, annotated by a stranger. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth about Alyssa." Alyssa was my best friend, practically my other half. She and I first bonded in high school over badly brewed coffee and the kind of teenage drama that feels like the end of the world when you're 15. We'd been inseparable ever since. I'd always thought of her as an extension of myself, someone who not only knew my secrets, but held them safe. Until that moment, I never imagined she'd betray me. And then there was Ethan, my ex. We'd broken up nearly a year ago, and it hadn't been pretty. We'd started out strong. He was charismatic, witty, and incredibly attentive, but the relationship soon devolved into something I only recognized as toxic in hindsight. He became jealous, suspicious, constantly demanding details about my every move. I tried to accommodate him, believing that compromise was part of love. Turns out I was enabling his paranoia, and when I discovered he was flirting with another woman behind my back, I broke things off. It was messy. I thought I'd seen the worst heartbreak then. I was wrong. So there I was, sitting in bed, phone in hand, a jolt of adrenaline seizing my body. My heart hammered as I zoomed in on the screenshots. I recognized my own words. Casual remarks about my day, deeper thoughts about my lingering resentment toward Ethan, complaints about sleepless nights, or random musings about life. Each screenshot came with a timestamp. Each one had been sent by Alyssa to a contact, labeled simply as E, accompanied by short, leading comments of hers. FYI. Check this out. Thought you'd want to see this. And even, "You were right about her." It felt like I'd been sucker punched. My mind couldn't process it all at once. I had so many questions. How long had this been going on? Why would Alyssa do this to me? And how did these screenshots end up in my inbox? I called the unknown number, but of course no one answered. My hands shook, and a sour taste filled my mouth. I thought maybe I should call Alyssa first, but I had no idea what I'd say. "Hello, bestie. Why are you leaking every personal thought I ever shared with you to my ex?" So I just sat there, lost in a haze of betrayal. My entire world tilted on its axis. Suddenly, all the small inconsistencies I'd noticed over the past few months started to fit together. Alyssa would ask peculiar questions about Ethan, or she'd casually mention things she claimed to have heard through the grapevine, even though no one else seemed to know those details. Once, when we were out for drinks, I saw her flipping her phone down on the table every time I glanced over, as if she didn't want me to see her conversation. I'd chalked it up to her having an embarrassing Tinder fling or something along those lines. How naive I felt now. I remembered the day Ethan and I ran into each other unexpectedly at the grocery store, months after our breakup. He smiled in that smug way and commented on how I was looking into therapy. I hadn't told him that. I'd only mentioned it to Alyssa. My cheeks flamed, and the conversation ended awkwardly. I spent days afterward trying to figure out who might have told him. I finally convinced myself he must have picked it up from mutual friends. I was too trusting to consider the possibility that Alyssa, of all people, was funneling information directly to him. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces fell into place. I tried to recall the exact moment I might have become suspicious. There was a night about 3 months earlier when Alyssa and I were sitting on my couch, binging reality TV. I remember pausing the show and telling her I still felt haunted by Ethan, that, in some twisted way, I missed his presence. I even admitted that sometimes I was tempted to see what he was up to on social media, to see if he'd moved on. Alyssa had acted supportive, telling me it was normal to have unresolved feelings. She said, "Don't worry, this is between us," with a comforting smile. But within days, Ethan had sent me this cryptic text. "Missing me, huh?" I was furious, demanding how he knew, but he just played coy. I let it slide, never suspecting my best friend. Now the ugly truth stared back at me from my phone screen. There were at least a dozen screenshots attached, but the unknown number promised more proof if I needed it. I felt nauseous. The person who sent them wrote, "I'm sorry you had to find out like this, but you deserve the truth." Maybe it was someone who finally grew a conscience. Or perhaps a mutual acquaintance of Ethan's. I couldn't be sure, but it hardly mattered. The bottom line was that Alyssa had been feeding my personal info to Ethan for what looked like months. I got out of bed on shaky legs, paced my room, then sank onto the floor. Who do you turn to when your closest confidant is the one stabbing you in the back? The pain felt so surreal. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I had the urge to call someone. But who? My mom was in another state. My sister and I weren't that close, And most of my other friends weren't people I shared daily heartbreak with. Alyssa had been that person. She knew everything. My secrets, my regrets, my hopes. All of it was apparently up for grabs if Ethan asked. I decided to do something I'm not proud of. I went snooping. Alyssa had given me her Netflix password a while back, and it was the same for her email account. She'd admitted that once when we were trying to log into a streaming service. It was a huge violation of privacy, but I had to see if there was any trace of Ethan in her inbox or sent messages. So I typed in her email address and password, and horrifyingly, it worked. My heart pounded as I navigated the seas of her personal messages. Most were harmless, the usual newsletters and updates, but after some digging, I found a folder labeled MISC. Inside were forwarded emails from a phone backup. The subject lines were vague, but I clicked on one thread out of curiosity. My entire body froze. It was a conversation between Alyssa and Ethan, date-stamped all the way back to last Christmas, which was around the time Ethan and I had parted ways. She was sending him screenshots of our texts, things I said in confidence. He replied with comments like, "Knew it," or, "You're right, she's just being dramatic." My eyes burned as I scrolled deeper. Some were humiliating confessions I'd made about my insecurities and mental health struggles. Alyssa provided them like it was gossip. I nearly threw my laptop in rage. In that moment, my sorrow morphed into fury. This had been going on for months, maybe even since the day of the breakup. With every click, I found fresh confirmations of her betrayal. Worse yet, it appeared Ethan encouraged her. "Send me more. What else did she say today?" He'd occasionally respond with mocking. Alyssa would respond with mild disclaimers like, "I feel bad doing this." But she always attached another screenshot. It was like some sick game they were playing. I shut the laptop and stared at the wall, feeling violated in a way I never had before. Betrayal by a romantic partner was one thing. I'd already gone through that with Ethan. But betrayal by your best friend was a whole different level. I remembered a time I told Alyssa, half-jokingly, that she was the only person on the planet I trusted with my life. That memory stung like acid now. I spent the next hour spiraling. Part of me considered calling the police. But on what grounds? It wasn't illegal to share screenshots if it wasn't blackmail or extortion. Another part of me wanted to drive to her apartment, throw the door open, and demand answers. But I was too wrecked to face her directly without risking a total meltdown. I also considered calling Ethan, to rage at him for exploiting me like this, but I knew I'd just be giving him more ammunition. He'd feed off my anger. Eventually, I decided I needed someone else's perspective. Someone I trusted enough, but who wasn't close to either Alyssa or Ethan. My coworker, Lindsay, had become a friend in recent months. We weren't super close, but I knew she was level-headed and had a strong sense of loyalty. I texted her, "Hey, are you free? Something huge just happened." She replied almost instantly, telling me she could meet me at a local cafe in half an hour. Good enough. I arrived early, sat at a corner table, and tried to compose myself. When Lindsay walked in, she took one look at my tear-streaked face and gave me a concerned hug. I unloaded everything in a rush. The screenshots, Alyssa's betrayal, Ethan's involvement. Lindsay's eyes widened. She shook her head, repeating, "That's messed up," under her breath. She encouraged me to confront Alyssa directly, to gather whatever evidence I needed and protect myself from any potential fallout. "If she's sending him your personal info," Lindsay said, "who knows what else they're up to? You can't just let this go." She was right. The next day, I mustered my courage and texted Alyssa, "We need to talk, face to face." She replied within minutes, acting oblivious. "Sure, everything okay?" I felt a flash of anger reading her cheery response. How could she pretend everything was normal? I met her at her place that evening. The second she opened the door, I saw a flicker of anxiety in her expression. She invited me in, offered me a drink, but I refused. I stayed standing, arms crossed over my chest, trying to contain the anger swirling in my gut. Finally, I just blurted it out. "Who have you been talking to behind my back?" She played dumb. "What do you mean? I'm not—" But before she could finish, I showed her the screenshots on my phone. Her face paled. She opened and closed her mouth, searching for words. "Are those from Ethan?" she finally managed. "No, they're from someone else. But they're your messages, Alyssa. You've been sending my personal stuff to him for months. I know about the emails, too." I held her gaze, refusing to back down. She inhaled sharply, tears welling in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were tears of guilt or fear at being caught. Probably both. She tried to explain, a stumbling half-story of how Ethan reached out to her first, begging for updates on how I was coping after the breakup. He supposedly claimed he was worried about my mental health. She admitted it started with small bits of information, like me being upset or me wanting to call him. Then it escalated. She insisted Ethan was manipulative, that he'd guilted her into sharing more by saying if she really cared about me, she'd tell him what was going on. Next thing she knew, she said, it was a habit she couldn't break. She claimed she felt trapped and scared because Ethan threatened to reveal things she'd told him in confidence if she didn't comply. I stood there, my jaw clenched. "So you threw me under the bus to save yourself, is that it?" I asked. She broke down, sobbing apologies, saying she never meant to hurt me. But I wasn't buying it. "You could have come to me at any time," I said, voice shaking. "You could have told me Ethan was pressuring you. Instead, you kept sending him everything I told you in secret. You sold me out, Alyssa." Her sobs grew louder. She confessed that she'd tried to stop many times, but every time Ethan would lure her back in with guilt trips or threats. "He said he'd show my boyfriend some old photos I regretted taking," she admitted, sobbing harder. "He told me he'd ruin my reputation. I was terrified, and I thought, I don't know. I thought you'd never find out. I'm so sorry." Part of me wanted to feel empathy for her fear, but every time I considered it, I remembered the humiliation of those messages. The mocking undertone in Ethan's replies. I'd vented to her about my deepest insecurities, like how I felt I wasn't good enough, how I'd struggled with anxiety and nightmares. She handed it all over to the person who loved exploiting my vulnerabilities. "You betrayed me," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how you expect me to forgive this." She kept begging me not to end our friendship, asking me to understand her side. I felt physically ill listening to her half-hearted excuses. I didn't want to hear it anymore, so I left, ignoring her desperate pleas to talk further. In the days that followed, she bombarded me with text messages, voicemails, even notes slipped under my apartment door. Each one was some variation of, "I'm sorry. I was scared. Please talk to me." I was in no state to respond. My head was spinning with anger, hurt, and confusion. On top of that, I kept receiving more anonymous messages from that unknown number. They sent me additional screenshots, more evidence of Alyssa and Ethan's private chat. It was painful to look at, but it solidified my decision to cut Alyssa out of my life. During this time, Ethan decided to poke the bear. He sent me a text. "I guess you found out." No apology, no remorse. Just a smug acknowledgement that he had successfully messed with my life again. I told him to never contact me again, or I'd pursue a harassment complaint. He never replied, but I started feeling paranoid, like at any moment something else could surface, or maybe he'd escalate things to tarnish my reputation at work. For a while, I slept with my phone on silent and had nightmares of them conspiring. I jumped at shadows, expecting the worst. To cope, I reached out to my Aunt Carol in Boston. She was the only family member I felt comfortable confiding in about this. She listened quietly as I sobbed my story over the phone. "You need to cut toxic people out of your life, sweetie," she advised gently. "And get some professional help if you can. Betrayal like this can leave a deep wound." I took her advice to heart, scheduling a few therapy appointments and forcing myself to open up about the trauma. The therapist helped me see that Alyssa's betrayal was not my fault, nor was it something I needed to process with her. It was something I needed to heal from, and that meant establishing firm boundaries. In the meantime, I realized I needed a support network. I found a new circle of friends, people I'd known casually but never confided in deeply. Coworkers, neighbors, acquaintances who shared common interests like hiking or yoga. Some weekends, I'd go on a day trip with them and briefly forget the heartbreak. I also reconnected with an old friend from college, Michelle, who'd always been kind and upbeat. She welcomed me into her group of friends like I'd never been gone. It felt liberating to have normal human interactions without the weight of suspicion. All the while, Alyssa tried to salvage our friendship. She wrote a long letter, about 6 pages, detailing her regret and fear. She explained that she felt she was in a deal with the devil scenario. She said it began with small white lies to Ethan, but then escalated. She claimed she was relieved that I finally knew because she wanted out. She ended the letter by saying she hoped someday I could forgive her. For a brief moment, I entertained the idea of meeting with her one last time, to talk it out. But every time I pictured her face, I felt a surge of rage and pain. I wasn't ready, and maybe I never would be. About a month later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Ethan had moved to another city for a job offer. Part of me was relieved. At least he'd be farther away. I changed my phone number, blocked him on all social media platforms, and did the same with Alyssa. I needed a clean slate, free from the chaos of their meddling. If that meant I had to isolate myself from old memories, so be it. Therapy became my lifeline. I learned that part of recovering from betrayal is understanding that you can't force closure. Sometimes the people who hurt you won't ever truly explain themselves or make amends. You have to create your own closure by acknowledging the pain and deciding to move forward. My therapist gave me exercises to cope with trust issues, because I found myself questioning the motives of everyone around me. It was a slow process, but with each session, I felt a little more like I could breathe. Of course, I had bad days, days when I'd see an old photo of Alyssa and me in happier times and feel a wave of sadness so fierce it made my chest tighten. I'd scroll through messages from better days, trying to reconcile that version of her with the person who handed my secrets to Ethan. In those moments, I'd let myself cry, then remind myself that she wasn't the friend I thought she was. One random Tuesday, about 3 months after the big reveal, I got a text from a new, unfamiliar number. My heart lurched, half expecting more drama. The text said, "I know you don't want to hear from me again, but I want you to have this." Attached was a link. For a moment, I thought it might be a virus or some malicious trick. Against my better judgment, I opened it on my computer with a secure browser. It led to a private cloud folder with hundreds of images, screenshots of Alyssa's conversations with Ethan, including direct messages that spanned the entire year. Some predated even our breakup. I felt numb scrolling through them, occasionally seeing my name reduced to a punchline or a target. It was far more extensive than what I'd already uncovered. My ex and my best friend had been exchanging commentary on my life like it was their favorite TV show. The text was from yet another anonymous Good Samaritan. Or maybe it was someone in Ethan's circle, or Alyssa's, who'd had enough. The content was staggering, but in a twisted way, it validated me. I wasn't crazy. Alyssa's betrayals ran deep, so I saved the folder in case I ever needed evidence. Though for what, I wasn't sure. Maybe just to remind myself that I wasn't imagining the magnitude of the betrayal. Over time, I found that living well truly was the best revenge. I threw myself into new hobbies, rock climbing, painting, volunteering at an animal shelter on weekends. I discovered I could find joy in parts of life I'd never explored, and it opened my eyes to the possibility of forging new, healthier relationships. With each new friend I made, I took it slow, revealing my personal details gradually and cautiously. It felt a bit sad that I'd lost my ability to trust as freely as before, but it also felt necessary for my own emotional safety. Occasionally, I'd receive an update from someone in our old circle. "Did you hear Alyssa's new boyfriend left her?" Or, "Ethan's had 3 different jobs in the last 6 months." I tried not to dwell on it. Whether they were thriving or suffering wasn't my concern anymore. My only priority was rebuilding my self-confidence and ensuring that my future relationships were grounded in mutual respect and trust. One day, I decided to write a lengthy reflection in my journal about the entire ordeal. I wrote about how the worst part of the betrayal wasn't even the personal details being shared. It was the shattering of that safe space I'd believed existed between me and my best friend. It felt like losing a limb, as though a fundamental part of my social and emotional structure was gone. That sense of security, of "I can tell her anything," died the moment I saw those screenshots. In its absence, I found an inner strength that taught me how to rely on myself in ways I never had to before. It's been nearly a year since that cataclysmic morning when I first opened those screenshots. Looking back, I can't say I'm fully over it. I still flinch when my phone buzzes unexpectedly. I still double-check with new friends that what I share in confidence stays between us. But I'm in a much better place overall. I've cultivated a handful of friendships based on genuine support and openness, and I've learned to place boundaries without feeling guilty. Some might say I've become more guarded, but honestly, it's just a smarter form of self-preservation. Do I hate Alyssa now? I don't think so. Hate requires energy I'm not willing to give. I feel sad for the person she became. Someone so caught up in her own mess that she sold out the trust of the person who loved her most. Maybe she was truly manipulated or scared. Maybe she was complicit. It doesn't excuse what she did, but understanding her fear helps me let go of resentment. What she did was wrong, but I refuse to let it define me. As for Ethan, he's a chapter of my life I'm content to leave closed. If he needed to see me suffer to feel in control, then that's on him. I've done my best to ensure he can't sabotage me any further. My focus is on healing and building a life that doesn't revolve around either of them. And that's the bizarre, painful, eye-opening story of how I found out my best friend had been screenshotting and sending all our private conversations to my ex for a year. I never imagined I'd lose 2 people so close to me in such a devastating way. But if there's one silver lining, it's that I learned a lesson about boundaries, personal strength, and the importance of paying attention to those subtle warning signs I once ignored. Now, I'm sharing this because maybe someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Betrayal can come from the last person you'd expect, and it hurts like hell, but you can survive it. You can reclaim your life from the ashes, and you can do it without stooping to their level. The world's full of genuine souls, and after something like this, you become a lot better at recognizing them. If you're reading this, and you've been through something similar, don't let the bitterness win. It's okay to grieve the loss. It's okay to rage. Just know there's life after betrayal, and it can be a good one. Sometimes even better than before, because you know your own worth like never before. I wish I could give this story a neat, happy ending, but real life is messy. I still have trust issues. I still have nightmares about people conspiring behind my back. However, those nightmares come less frequently now. The anger and pain aren't all-consuming anymore. I found new paths, new friends, and a deeper appreciation for honesty. And who knows, maybe someday Alyssa will finally free herself from whatever insecurities drove her to betray me. Maybe she'll figure out that she shouldn't compromise her morals just to avoid facing the consequences of her own life choices, or maybe not. Either way, that's her journey, not mine. Mine is about moving forward, a little bruised, a little wiser, but alive and capable of rebuilding trust with people who earn it. To anyone who's taken the time to read all this, thank you. If you're ever in a similar place, where the person you trusted most turns out to be the one feeding your vulnerabilities to someone who wants to hurt you, know you're not powerless. It might feel like your entire world is shattered, but every day you survive that pain, you're putting the pieces back together, and eventually, you emerge stronger on the other side, with a clearer sense of who you are and what you deserve. I'm still healing, but I'm doing it on my own terms now, and that at least is something no one can take from me again.